Oh, come on. Well, hello everybody, and welcome, somewhat late, to the latest edition of the Inworld Review. We're broadcasting live from Chilbone's Second Life, and we're brought to you in association with A-View TV, except that I now have a window obscuring the broadcast, the channel. A Skype window came to the front. Okay. Right. First of all, I'd like to apologise for those of you tuned in live last week. The live stream of this recording didn't actually come up last week, which was most unfortunate. And not only that, when we published the offline copy up at Slatist, it cut off its audio after about 70 minutes. So we had only half a show, even in replay. Such are the trials and tribulations of getting this show to air. Hopefully we're going to be okay this week. We're late because we were sorting out a few technical problems. Tara's actually handling the stream this week, and I am also filming it offline for your later dictation in replay at Slatist or YouTube or wherever indeed. So apologies all around, and let's just hope that this show, although it is late, transpires properly. What can I say? You can tell I'm flustered. So flustered, okay. So flustered indeed that I haven't even got all my links open because I was being hijacked with other things. However, just for the formalities out the way, it is the yes, it's the 5th of October. Now we really are talking awesome here, aren't we? 5th of October of the year 2014. Now, let me think. Yes, 2014. I'm not going to get that wrong again. And yes, that's for the records. So here we go. Now, there is a lot of news this week. I'm going to actually sort of fall back straight to Tara here. And while I actually load some of my other news, most of it, however, of course, has come from Hypergrid Business, doesn't it always? And the main feature there is that Maria's survey is over, and the winners are none other than Island Oasis. So before I hand over to Tara, I'd like to introduce everybody in the studio, including Damean, who's just on camera, who is the CEO of, well, I believe that you are the CEO, aren't you, of Oasis?
That's correct.
Damean.
I'm a co-founder.
Co-founder.
And operator. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And operator. Okay, well, that's absolutely great. And we'll be coming back to talk to you a little bit later, but welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And yeah, and of course we have got Maria here too. So before do anything else, I'll say hello to Maria. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Mel. Always great to be here.
Right. And finally, we have Tara, as always. Hi there, Tara.
And I guess I better unmute myself.
Indeed, that can help. Believe me. Yes. one of those things, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. So, what I'm going to do, Tara, if it's okay, I know you're in the hot seat here broadcasting, but maybe I thought if I hand it over to you now, if you get your sort of take on the week out the way, it gives me time to load some of my links and sort of move the show on so you can focus maybe a bit more on filming. So take it away.
Well, that sounds like a really, really excellent idea because you're flustered and so am I. You think you have everything all set up and then you turn everything on and it just doesn't work. It's one of those days, I'm afraid. Anyway, here we are. Welcome. It's the sun is out in the Pacific Northwest, so I guess it qualifies as Indian summer. And of course, my fervent wish right now is not that Indian summer continue indefinitely, but rather that we have somebody else back next week who can handle cameras, so I don't have to. So all I have to think about is news. Anyway, well, I have been a little behind in getting my show and tell in at the first, which is what I like to do. But since I have a shot of my show and tell for this week, we have the puppy who breathes, and this is definitely the all-time extra special item from this year's gotcha event. Finally, after I went back to work on another machine, and took another couple of threw a couple of more 50 lindens at this, and finally came up with the puppy. And he's just entirely too cute, and because he's sleeping, the kitties haven't noticed him yet, which is. Now this of course may be subject to change in future weeks if the puppy gets to stick around. Now of course I have this issue that I notice that my lips aren't moving, but I can't bring my interface up to see what's wrong. So we'll just march ahead here forthrightly and not worry too much about the technical things that aren't quite right. Let's see. An article that I ran across in PBS this week, which I'm just going to kind of refer people to because it was quite fascinating to me. One of the things that gets kicked around in techie circles and certainly comes up in virtual environments is this business of screen time and how much screen time is healthy and how much screen time is unhealthy. And an area that we haven't talked about particularly is when you start talking screen time and kids. And Second Life used to have the area for Teen Grid, which they closed down and then modified their access to allow younger basically allow teens under circumstances into the main grid. We do know that there's lots of educators out there, and I think there's probably, who knows how many K-12 educators are using OpenSIMs for education. But anyway, this article was talking about some of the elements of effective use of computers and screen time in schools, and addressing the issues of screen time, good screen time and bad screen time. And what was very interesting to me as a little takeaway, and some of one of the schools that they talked about, they've got some grade levels where they allow particular kinds of use or a certain amount of time of use. But what they're really focusing on are the ways that school kids can use computers or laptops or tablets as collaboration tools and using them together, so that what happens is, instead of them being occasions where no social skills are being developed or social skills atrophy, which is the other thing that's been discovered with kids spending too much time in front of computers, it's actually enhancing their social skills when they're at school and have the opportunities to be around a lot of people and the collaboration stuff. And then in their home study time, in their homework time, they get some of the stuff that they might get as in the old style classroom where you sit on your fanny and you listen to the teacher talk for half an hour, whatever. So I found that quite fascinating. So if I don't have the link in front of me, I can dig it up later when I'm not trying to talk and run cameras at the same time. But this was at the pbs.org on their news site, which I find to be a real godsend for lots of interesting articles and good takes and less inflammatory news coverage than mainstream commercial news tends to indulge in. Let's see. I'd say, one of the big items that certainly got some blog postings this week was Facebook's turnaround on the issue of alternate identities and use of alternate names, thanks to the gay, lesbian, bi community, and specifically the drag community. And apparently there was a round of someone, as it turned out, at Facebook who sort of targeted the part of that community and started closing accounts because of drag queens who were using, obviously, names other than their legal names. This resulted in quite a backlash and quite a bit of media exposure this week. And Facebook they haven't done a complete 180, and that's probably the important thing to keep in mind for virtual worlds and virtual identities. That this does not actually, when you read it carefully, imply that you now have a free pass for using an avatar name on Facebook. Some of us do and have not been taken down. There certainly were people going back several years who lost Facebook accounts that were with their avatar names. But the kind of the cut to the chase on reading all this, with Second Life avatar names, the issue is only tends to come up if somebody gets reported. So, if you're not particularly high profile using an avatar name, chances are excellent you'll be able to get away for it for some period of time. Anyway, I thought that was a very interesting development. And it was actually refreshing to see Facebook kind of modify and soften their position just a little bit on that business of using names other than one's legal name. Let's see. I think the rest of what I have is all in the arena of events. And I just have a couple. First off, the Making Strides Against Breast Cancer in Second Life kicked off this past week, and they're have a month-long round of events and fundraising activities going on. And NRAPay, as usual, has summarized a lot of info on what's going on, and there's kiosks and what have you, but it's Making Strides Against Breast Cancer. Speaking of NRAPay, a fun little item in her blog this week on the expansion of the United Sailing Sims on the north side, creating an area called Blake Passage, which interestingly is themed on the Columbia River of my neck of the woods. And it offers a new area of North America to the Northwest, etc., even the virtual space to explore by boat and plane. I may actually have to get out one of those boats that's in my inventory and go check it out and see what they've done to it. I suspect from a couple of screenshots she gave that it's just the section of the Columbia River that's west of the Cascade Mountains, because you get east of the mountains in Washington State, and it's anything but trees along the Columbia. It's very dry, but that should be fun to see. And my last item is going to be there's a new exhibit at Leah 13, the Bread and Rose, about the Bread and Roses strike. The Bread and Roses strike took place in Lawrence, Massachusetts in 1912. It's a landmark in the history of American labor. Gained the attention of the nation, and it's being used in part as an educational site. There's a whole series of things, and there's some class notes that got passed along to me. But you'll soon learn there are many divisions of gender, class, race, and ethnicity for the people of Lawrence. And part of what you do there's an interactive element to this. You pick a person. You're able to put on their avatar, and then you have to go to work, and you have to do a certain amount of production in a certain amount of time, and so you get the opportunity to kind of experience what it was like at that time, which resulted in this landmark strike. Sounds like a really intriguing build and an interesting use of one of the Linden Endowment for the Arts Sims. That's Leah 13. And I think there was one more. Was there one more? That seems to be what I had. So I'm going to go back to being a camera person.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tara. I'm sure you can interject again at appropriate points as we go along. Right. Well, believe it or not, I've got the usual browser problems here, but I have managed to cough up a few links before we head over to Maria. The Metropolis grid, Metropolis metaverse. The annoying light and second opening of the room Ferris Squito showing the early works of Brino. And this, I think, is already there. I'm actually going to quickly copy and paste into Skype. And I hope it gets over to the channel, the link for that one. And I haven't even seen it. Something called PlayStation Home. This was an attempt by Sony to put a kind of virtual world on the front screen of their PlayStation, and it was actually described as a Second Life alternative, albeit only on PlayStation. And it seems that Sony have decided to shut it down early next year. So yet another virtual platform is going away. I have a link at TechSpot on this, so I will just copy that one over too, for those of you interested. It's I'm actually looking at the post here, and there's a sort of picture on it. It's quite a nice looking place, really, except for all those sort of comic-like word balloons hanging out of people's mouths. Also, Tara mentioned the breast cancer campaign, but we often forget that, the Home and Garden exhibition in Second Life, which is a Relay for Life fundraiser, is actually over. But, of course, Relay for Life has also been happening on another grid. It's not on the hypergrid, but it's a grid called Inworld, spelled with a Z. And I haven't a clue how much this is in real money, but apparently RFL of Inworlds raised over 1 million Izzies. Yes, the currency there called Izzies. I really don't know how much they're worth in real world money, but I mean, if we assume they're valued at something like the Linden, that's a fairly sizable amount of money. It's not $1 million, but 1 million Izzies can be probably quite a few £1,000s. I can't be sure of that. But if you'd like to check out more details on that one, I got the report from Daniel Voyager, and the link is on its way over now. So what else have I got here? Just close down the bits that we don't need again. Yeah, Teachers Education Review. Right, I'm going to copy this and paste the link yet again. Oh, Maria has told me that comes to about $4,000 US, by the way, the money raised in Worlds. So thanks, Maria. That's a sizable sum indeed. I hope I got this one right. Yes, indeed. This is Teachers Education Review. I pasted the link over, and this is Virtual Worlds in Education, 21st of September, 1914. The reason I'm pasting this is that obviously that date has passed, but it's an audio recording of the actual event. So if you're interested in education, etc., a good place to check out. People like Penny Sheehy, Marianne Malmstrom, and somebody called Bryn Stockley are principally people interviewed on the, let's call it a podcast, shall we? And finally, open so far is a link to the Singularity Hub. This place is called, and link on the way again. The headline of this article is virtual reality may become the next great media platform, but can it fool all five senses? And there's a lovely phrase by somebody who calls media technologies engines of empathy. I love that phrase. I'm not quite sure what it means. Well, yeah, well, I know what it means, but is technology engines of empathy? It's a very good point. If all our five senses are working, then who's to say the sixth sense of empathy doesn't start working too? Anyway, just a very, very kind of interesting sort of article overview there, as ever, spot off my Oculus Rift and all the other things happening. So you might have to catch on that. I'm sure Maria's going to cover this. CTMX, who hosts those wonderfully cheap grids and stuff, had a breach, but they've recovered from it. I gather, however, that the fate of OS Grid has come to plague a couple of other grids recently too. So I think Maria will have more news on that as we go along. So I'll tell you what, I'm actually going to hand over to Maria. I've got a few other links here, but they're quite possibly things Maria will cover, and if she does, I'll come back to them later. So why don't I hand the microphone over to you, Maria, and let's hear all your headline news from the week.
All right. So first, a quick correction. I just looked up the Inworld's exchange rate is 500 Izzies to the dollar. So a million comes out to $2,000, not $4,000. So that out of the way, the big news this week is the results of the survey. And before I ask Damean what makes Inworld so great, I wanted to talk a little bit about what the survey was. So the survey was not comparing different grids and everybody saying which grid they like better. The survey was for the residents of each particular grid to say how much they liked their own grid. So since people who live on a grid tend to like their own grid, otherwise they would leave that grid, the results were, for the most part, pretty high. So when I'm saying that Inworlds did extremely well in the survey, people didn't choose them over other grids. People liked them slightly more than they liked than the residents of other grids liked their own grids. So
if I can interrupt, so Inworlds did quite well here, or are you talking about Island Oasis?
So I meant Island Oasis. I had Inworld on my tongue.
Right. I was going to correct you, but I was going to let you finish first.
I just did that calculation. Yes.
I thought we were on the wrong track there. Okay.
About 600 people rated their grids. About 40 or so were duplicate votes that I deleted. So this is not a case of ballot stuffing. And there were no instances of people trying to torpedo other grids by submitting a bunch of negative votes. So Island Oasis is on top of the overall ranking, honestly, because their residents really like the grid. And now, Damean, what is it about Island Oasis that people like so much?
Well, it's really kind of hard. I was actually kind of surprised when I heard the results because we weren't aware of the release of the new survey until the day before voting ended. So we didn't have an opportunity to really make the announcement to our members until last minute. So we were fortunate enough to have some members on the grid take it upon themselves to vote. I think for a lot of our members, it's the personal touch. Sugar, who's my wife and also my partner and co-owner of Island Oasis, she and I are hands-on operators. We spend a lot of time in World. We spend a lot of time talking to our members. We attend events. We are constantly supporting our members. We provide a great deal of extra features and things that maybe some other grids do not provide, some tools, some nice to haves, and we're constantly working on improving those tools and developing them and trying to make the end user experience as pleasant as possible. And that's our number one focus always since we opened almost 4 years ago. So if I had to answer that question, I would say that's kind of it, I can't speak for my residents, but I can say from my perspective, if I had to answer that question, I would say that's probably what it is.
Now, the last time you guys were at the top of the survey once before in 2011. And I have to tell
Correct.
people there's over 200 different grids that are out there in OpenSim. And in 2011, people had to write in the name of Island Oasis because
Yeah.
it was so small. It only had 43
Weren't even
regions.
on the list.
You
Yeah.
weren't even on the list. You only had 800 total residents and only a couple of hundred active users. So this
Correct.
grid was not on anyone's radar. People wrote it in, and it scored at the top. And since then, of course, Island Oasis has grown into a top 10 grid. It's got more than 200 regions now. It is close to 1,000 active monthly users. So it was kind of a foreshadowing there, or a preview of what was going to happen when the grid took first place. People
Right.
it really was the beginning of a big growth period. Now, usually what happens when grids grow is they start to slack off in some areas. Their customer service starts to drag a little bit because they can't keep up with the growth, and they're not answering tickets fast enough. Maybe the drama starts to build in the community,
Right.
and people start getting annoyed
Yeah.
with each other. So I wasn't even expecting Island Oasis to show back up now that it's such a big grid, but here you are. Could you talk to me a
Yeah.
little bit about how you dealt with the growth and what other grids can learn from your experience?
Well, if I had to answer, I guess I would say that we grew our rate of growth by some standards, by many people's standards, would have been it's slow. We have grown slowly, but I almost prefer that as a steady, sustainable growth as opposed to an overnight boom, overnight success kind of growth where you're unprepared for the huge influx of new residents and you're unable to handle that kind of volume and that kind of demand. Our growth has been steady and it has been sustainable, and I think that's the secret. Is we have allowed the grid to grow at a natural pace, and 99% of our exposure and advertising is word of mouth. We do very little advertising, so to speak. We utilize social media. We've just recently started doing mailings so that we can try and recapture old members that maybe haven't been here in a year or two, to try and get them to revisit the grid. And subsequently, a lot of those people will come back and say, hey, wow, things have changed a lot since I was here last. I'm going to buy a region. I'm going to put up a store. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. So we've made efforts to try and recapture and increase our retention rate of existing members and try and recapture older members that maybe, at one point in time left for whatever reason. And now they're reconsidering and say, hey, you know what? Things are different now. They're better. We're in a much newer version of OpenSim now. Things are, functioning better, and so on. So, that's kind of how I'd respond to that.
Another question I have for you is, you guys charge $35 a month for 15,000 per region. That's
Yes.
about half the
That's correct.
price of other regions in your category of the big commercial grids.
Yes.
But and the reason that commercial grids are able to offer a high level of service is because they do charge a little bit more for the land. How are you
Right.
able to offer lower prices while matching the grids on the service and support and technology that you offer?
Well, we do that by we do offer the $35 a month region for 15,000 prems, but in addition to that, we offer an elite region for $65 a month, and we find that a great number of our members like to take advantage of that because of the covenant and what's allowed and what's not allowed on certain region types. So, depending on what their objective is and what they're trying to accomplish, they're going to choose which region better suits their needs. We also have mainland now, which we recently rolled out a few months ago. And so we have revenue coming in from that. So that helps support things as well. We have revenue coming in from advertising. So, for example, if you own an Inworld business and you want to promote your business to other residents, you can purchase advertising space on our splash page and on our marketplace banner. We have our own Inworld marketplace dedicated to Island Oasis. You can advertise on there. So for a monthly fee, you can advertise there. So we have multiple sources of revenue coming in. We don't charge for things like uploads and imports and that kind of stuff, but we do have revenue coming in from other avenues to help support the grid.
I'm quite curious here. You say you have revenue coming in through your marketplace. Do you have your own currency?
We do. We do have our own currency, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, we do.
Right.
One of the other commercial grids that scored well this month, Xandromas, allows Kitely deliveries from the Kitely market to their grid.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have you thought about that at all, or do you have your own online marketplace for your grid, or what's your take on online marketplaces?
Well, I think online marketplaces are good. We have our own online marketplace, so I haven't been approached by Kitely, and I don't expect that I will be approached by Kitely to expand delivery into our grid. I think that since we have our own Inworld marketplace, online marketplace that you can get to from our website, we'll probably stick to that.
Okay. So I have a question about the hypergrid, because obviously hypergrid business, so I'm all over the hypergrid.
Sure.
And there's a couple of commercial grids have been looking at turning on hypergrid while adding security. Is that something that in the future you might consider as the hypergrid security improves and we get better filtering, like the way Kitely has done?
Sure.
And some other grids are looking at right now?
Right. I actually had just had this conversation with my wife and my partner yesterday. It's not something we would be against should we be certain that the security measures are put in place. For those who don't know the history here, when Island Oasis first opened, we were hypergridded. And we had the gates open for a while, and we opened the gates in response to some of our members and residents and merchants who had an interest in the hypergrid. So we opted to open the gates in response to that. But after some time of having it open, at the time, of course, this was back in 2011, so technology's better now, but at the time, we had some security issues, we had some just functionality issues, things like that. So we had another meeting with our residents and merchants, and we kind of put it up to a vote and said, what do you guys think we should do? And they voted to shut them down. And so in the interest of appeasing and keeping my members and residents and merchants happy, we made the choice to shut them off. Moving forward, I'm not opposed to it, and I'd be open to it should I feel comfortable and my residents and my merchants all feel comfortable that it's safe.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not against hypergrid per se. I just have some concerns about the security of it. And so I would have to feel satisfied that those concerns have been resolved before I would consider it.
Okay. Another question I have for you is, if you could summarize like one thing that your grid is known for, like Tangle Grid is the expo grid, Littlefield is, well, I'm not going to go into like their whole Avination is known for, actually it's every world is known for going down all the time.
Yo-yo
is there, somebody's the role-playing grid and somebody is this grid or that grid.
Sure.
Do you have, other than, being a tropical, paradise, which is the name of a totally different grid that's now defunct.
Right. Around.
How would you describe kind of the thing for your grid? Do you have a thing?
I don't know if we really have a thing. If from my perspective, I would say, our grid is a really tight-knit community, and that's what draws people here, because most of the people that come to Island Oasis come here through word of mouth, friends bringing them in, referred to by someone that they like and they trust. So the community is really the strong focal point of Island Oasis. Although, the name of the grid kind of infers it's a tropical themed grid. In reality, it really isn't. I mean, we have a lot of people who have various different themed regions that don't even fit within that parameter. But yeah, if I had to say what it was, I'd probably say community. We do, we do offer some features and things that others don't, but I wouldn't say we're known for that.
I was going to ask how the name came about, because we've been last week we were talking about the fact that I'd actually finally read the book Ready Player One, and of course the metaverse there was known as the Oasis. No coincidence, I take it.
Well, back in 2011, when my wife and I started the grid, we threw out a couple different ideas. What do we think would be a good name? We can't use Third Life. We can't use this. We can't use that. Things that, either the grid already exists or it just sounds really cheesy and we're not going to do that. I'm an island kind of person. To me, that's my paradise. So that's a name I kind of came up with, and it just stuck. And we kind of ran with it, Yeah.
And so your wife is a desert person, so you figured you'd
No,
combine
she loves the
desert
islands
oasis,
and the beaches
oasis
well.
from the desert. And
I was thinking, it's island something, and she's like, "What about Island Oasis?" I'm like, "Boom, you got it. That's it." And we kind of
usually think of it, in the desert oasis.
Right.
What do you think of grids that have a referral policy? Like, for example, Zanjamas and Dream Nation take the referred by members, existing members, a step further, that they don't have any public signups at all. Is that something that appeals to you guys at all?
You mean as far as like our grid is by invitation only kind of thing, or you can only join if you're referred to by an existing residence?
Exactly. Is that something? What do you think of that? What do you think of that approach?
I think that for those grids, that's what works for them. It really depends on is determined by the founders and operators. What is their vision? What are they trying to accomplish? And in certain circumstances, that might work. For us, I don't see that as working. I wouldn't consider applying that type of registration process to what we do, but for other grids, it's completely appropriate to do. Just depending on your niche, what your objectives are, and what you're trying to accomplish, and what your vision is.
So what's next for you guys? Any big major events coming up, or
Well, we have some holiday events coming up. We have a Halloween sim we're working on. We're going to do a Halloween party, pumpkin hunt. We do that every year. I think last year we gave away almost 10,000 Paolinos for the pumpkin hunt. I think we're going to be doing a Thanksgiving dinner feast for those who maybe can't have Thanksgiving with their family for whatever reason. Those kinds of things, holiday events, and then we have our daily, club events, things going on like that. I know that there's going to be a corn maze that's going to be open 24/7 for a week shortly in the month of October. And then there's prizes, and there's an event at the end to celebrate the holiday.
All right.
For us, as far as technology goes and things we're working on, these are some things I'm actually going to be talking about today at our town hall. We're working on our own dedicated viewer. We're working with the developers of Firestorm to come up with our own dedicated viewer with Oculus Rift support.
Oh, excellent.
We're working on a Facebook app so that people can log on via Facebook, talk to their friends in IM, talk in local chat, check your balance, check your transaction history, that kind of stuff. That's in beta right now. We're working on Beta Grid 0801, and we'll be opening beta testing up for our residents probably within the next week, so that they can come on the Beta Grid and do their own testing, because we will not upgrade until we feel that the upgrade's not going to adversely affect our residents, because they're our primary concern. So there's some things we have going on. We're busy.
I just going to say that's actually has aroused my curiosity because I think, and I can't be sure of this, but I think I realized in the week that it was Metropolis or one of the other grids actually has that sort of Facebook thing already where you can literally communicate offline. It's something Second Life once had with their SLIM thing, and I missed that sorely. But do you think that it really extends engagement? Because to me, so. SLIM in SL was a very important thing because I didn't have to be logged in, and I could even be logged in concurrently, and I could use it. So it was like a proper IM for my contacts.
Yeah, and the way ours works is it actually logs you onto the grid. Your avatar actually lands in world. So you can talk in local chat, you can talk in IM, you can send money to other members, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I see it as a valuable tool. Like personally for me, if I'm in a situation where I can't log on with a viewer, for whatever reason, the firewall has the gaming ports blocked or whatever that reason might be, it's an alternative. It's a way for me to still communicate and stay in touch with my residents.
Well, so I use quite frequently on my desktop. There's a client called Radagast, which gets me to Second Life and all. I can't see the pictures, but I can do just about everything else. And actually, it's excellent for sorting out an inventory, which always seems to be a nightmare.
I've used it myself.
And also on the iPad, I've got Pocket Metaverse Pro, which actually got updated today. I can't tell you give you a report on that because I haven't been into it today, but I noticed it updated today for the first time in yonks. But that is equally useful because it allows me not just to get into Second Life, but also into OpenSim. So all I really need is the grid information to actually log in. So are there presumably software that like that would actually get into your grid too? I know you're a closed grid, but presumably if they've got a username and password, they can come in that way as well.
If they have an account and they have the grid information, they certainly can log on with Radagast and the other Pocket Metaverse. And I can't remember the one for Android right now. But yes.
Lumia?
Yes.
Lumia. Yeah, I think there's actually two now. I think there's actually two now on Android, but I'd have to check that out. Okay, the other thing, I don't know whether Maria has more questions, but the other thing that just occurred to me was that when we were talking before you came on, we know you've got to disappear by about 2, but hopefully you'll hang around for the conversation before then. But the reason you have to disappear is... the reason you have to disappear, of course, is your own town hall. And you mentioned to me earlier that you actually film those as well. Are these published on the web? Where our viewers basically always seem to be interested in avatar chat, for want of a better word. Is that available on YouTube or on the web anywhere? Or is it
absolutely? Yes, it is. We have an Island Oasis channel on YouTube. You can subscribe to it, and we post all of our town hall videos on that channel. Last month, we do this on the first Sunday of every month at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Last month's meeting didn't record so well. We ran into some technical difficulties, which you guys can relate to. So that one didn't make it up there. But yes, we make it a practice to get those up there. And we post them on YouTube, and then we put them on our own website in the video section.
Right. Oh, well, that's great. I'm sure a lot of our viewers who seem to specialize in watching talking heads will be keen to check that out. It's amazing what the draw there is to just sort of picture radio discussion. So maybe you'll get a few people checking out that YouTube channel. So the account at YouTube is simply Island Oasis.
Correct.
Right. Okay, great. So back to you, Maria.
All right.
I don't know if you've got any other questions, or I know there's a lot of news.
I'm just gonna go right in through the rest of the survey. I'll quickly summarize it. Obviously, the story is up for anybody who wants all the details, and if anybody wants to see the raw numbers or the comments, they can just email me, and I will ship them over. Last year, a couple of grids asked me for either their comments. I guess they're going to use them in promotional materials. And I think one person wanted to see the data because they wanted to check my math, which is fine, which is fine. So so after Island Oasis, the next grid for the best overall score was the adult grid, which was also a write-in grid, and it's a new one for me, but it's really been growing rapidly these last couple of months because I went and I checked its statistics. It's a fast-growing one. They've got about 64 regions right now, and they went from 900 registered users 2 months ago to 2,300 now. So they've just registered over 1,400 new users to this grid. They don't release the active user numbers, but the growth of the closest you get is the growth of registration, which is pretty dramatic growth. They've doubled in size over the last 2 months. Very interesting. Also, because there was a discussion on one of the OpenSim virtual communities about, do people in OpenSim even want adult content? So the answer is yes, they do. And I went and double checked my statistics on Hyperica. What do people search for? And after freebies, adult stuff is the second most popular choice. So definitely if you are somebody who's in the adult industry, there's definitely a market for your stuff in OpenSim. So after that, the next overall scores were Virtual Highway, which has an excellent record of getting news and event announcements to me on a regular basis, like clockwork, every 2 weeks. I strongly applaud them for doing that. Zandromas, which is an invitation-only grid, that's been doing really well. Entangle Grid was in 5th place. They're the Expo grid, and they have really drawn a lot of attention to themselves over these past few months with these expos because they were pretty much totally unknown, a brand new grid, and they've really put themselves on the map there.
Brilliant idea there, I think.
Yeah. So 88.8% of the respondents said they would absolutely recommend their grids. So that's a good thing to know. If you're in Second Life and you're thinking about experimenting with OpenSim, the people who are there do enjoy it very much. And 4 grids actually had perfect scores, where 100% of the people who ranked them said that they would recommend that grid. And those were Naris Nook, Virtual Highway, Tangle Grid, and the Adult Grid. All right. And we had the best community. That was the Zandromas grid, which is an invitation-only grid, came in first. For best support, Zandromas also came out on top, and they had a score of 5.0. What's interesting for Zandromas is that while they do their own servers, but the technology is actually provided by ZetaMex, an OpenSim hosting company. So they share the credit for the good support and the good technology there. And for me, this is interesting because it proves that you can have a really high-ranking grid by focusing on community building and let someone else handle your technology stuff. You don't have to be a techie to open up a new grid and do well with it.
Correct.
Kitely came in on top in technology, and Kitely, of course, does their own technology. They're known as the on-demand cloud-based grid. And of course, they run the Hypergrid's only multi-grid marketplace. And a lot of people pointed out their innovative structure and the marketplace as some of the reasons why they really liked it. People also said that that the customers aren't beta testers, and this reminded me of what Damean was saying about them having a beta grid, testing everything on the beta grid before rolling it out in the main grid. That people were happy that Kitely also doesn't test stuff on its users. Kitely tests stuff separately and rolls it out after it works. So if you're a grid that doesn't do that, maybe you should consider trying that. The grid that came out with the best content ranking was Nara's Nook. They just barely squeaked into the survey. They only had 10 write-in votes. They are a cute little destination. They have interactive fiction, and it's a place where writers come to experiment with creating virtual characters from their books. They hold readings. There's a little cafe where writers can come and write. So and this is all they do. So they're very small. They're very tightly focused. They're on the hypergrid. They invite everyone to come in. And people really, really love what they're doing over there. So I'm glad to see that working. And so the story is up, and people can come and read it. The grid that scored the worst across the board was OS Grid. And of course, they've been out for over a month. They've been out since late August, and they have put out.
Why?
Yeah. Well, 3 reasons. First, they're a giant grid, and when you have a giant grid, you've got giant problems. They are a nonprofit run by volunteers, so the support is forum based and peer to peer. You know, people can help you; they help you. The grid also has some management changes and some ongoing communication problems. They've stopped their town hall meetings. They've the level of communication between the grid administrators and the community has been decreasing dramatically over the past couple of years. People have been really complaining about it. They had a big political issue with Metropolis Grid, where they turned off hypergrid teleports to Metropolis on the OS Grid side, which really annoyed a lot of people, because you have the largest nonprofit grid turning off all teleports to the second largest nonprofit grid. It was, not a good thing to do. Nobody liked that. And then, of course, with the outage, they've had 7 updates since the outage started. No estimates of when things are going to go up. Very few communication to the public. The communication did happen, was often in the form of the internet relay chat, which only a few techies are on. And if you missed that particular chat, you missed it. So people were reposting chat transcripts in the forums. Really, really lousy way to communicate with the public, given how critical OS Grid is and how important it is to the community and how big it is and how many users it has. A real shame. ZetaMax communicated more that one night they were out than OS Grid did the whole month and a half that they've been out. So, people were like, oh, but OS Grid is all volunteers. Yeah, but what are those volunteers doing for the last month and a half? They're not running the grid because the grid is down, right? Okay, well, I shouldn't get too upset, because some of the volunteers are also working on the OpenSim Community Conference planning and stuff like that. So I'm sure they've got other stuff to keep them busy. But still, when your grid is down, that's when you want to communicate more, not less, with your members. So that was the story with OS Grid. And as you mentioned, Craft Grid also went down recently with RAID issues. RAID is that hard drive, that storage array that OS Grid had problems with. And Craft put out an announcement right away. They said if you have meetings on Monday or Tuesday, you might want to postpone them, giving a little bit of a time frame for how things are going to go. And they did have backups. They did have a second server, and it looks like they're going to be coming back up. Okay.
Good news. Yeah.
All right, back to other stuff that's happening.
Let me, if I may, I'll
yes,
just. I've loaded a few more links here, so I'll just.
Okay. While I take a little breather, eat a cough drop, and let you talk for a few minutes.
Okay, that sounds like a reasonably good idea. You know how slow my browser is, so then I can go to a few more. Right. First link is to Machinima Expo. Now, Machinima, for those of you who don't know, and well, we're Machinima after a fashion, although not really. Machinima is the art of virtual reality filmmaking, really, in a broad sense. There's inhabited Machinima, where it's like a film with a whole crew and everything recorded in world. And of course, there's what I call external constructed machinima with programs like Movie Storm, where you can design your whole movie and script it that way. The Machinima Expo, however, is a big event every year. It often covers Machinima from Second Life and OpenSims, and it happens every year, although there's a lot of other machinima involved. And the news here, I've just put the link into chat, is that this year they've decided to change into a long one-day festival with extended hours, rather than the traditional weekend job that they normally do. And as we are in autumn and approaching the end of the year, that will be coming up very shortly, November the 23rd, which is a Sunday. So it will collide with us, of course, but nevertheless, you might want to check that out. We'll also be joined probably next week by Melissa Robinson on this show, who's the organizer of the 24-hour Machinima project. And that is coming up, I think it's, I don't have the notes in front of me, but I think it's around the 5th of November, but she'll be talking more about that when she joins us next week. She was meant to be here today, but and make it at the last minute. Right.
A small correction now, that's the 48-hour Machinima contest.
Oh, I'm always getting that one wrong, aren't I? I don't know, what is it about me and 24/7, you know? It's one of those slips I always make. I can't get used to the idea of there being such a thing as 48 hours. But yes, indeed, they need a bit longer than one day to get the whole thing together. It's a pretty tight schedule. I hasten to add, I was on the team of one once. Just as a sort of actor, character. But, you know, it was unbelievable stress to get a whole proper storytelling machinima out in, you know, even 4 minutes. You know, 2 days is a real rush to get a good, decent job done. Right. I'm not sure whether I copied and pasted this one in or not. I got a bit hijacked there, so I'll do it again if I got it wrong. This is a link to Hyper Gazette. Very good for destinations, events and things. And this is another one for the Metropolis grid. They've got their Metroberfest happening. And I think, actually, I think I've goofed a bit here. It looks like today is actually the last day. So if later on you want to hop into Metropolis, you'll better get to that. The link is, in fact, simply the schedule. So it looks like
and they're on European time, so you're gonna have to rush to get over there before it ends.
Oh, indeed. Oh well, forget it, folks. We're on European time too. You'll be you might have an hour after we finish. Right now, now I don't know where Maria knows about this. In fact. Let me add, no, I'll get round to it later. I post on Google Plus, in fact, so I'm going to give you the link to Google Plus. This is posted by somebody whose name keeps popping up for me recently quite a lot. I may have met her on the Hypergrid Safaris. Her name is Leighton Marjoram, but she actually has news that there is a grid called Spellscape. And it has just joined the hypergrid. So we have another grid on the hypergrid, and you can find out a bit more about that at her post there. Now we're getting to serious territory here, very serious territory. My next link goes to the Psychiatric Bulletin. Oh, yes, indeed. Yeah, we're all mad. I know it. Right. This actually is the title of blog called, well, it's not really a blog. It's actually a paper. It's called Using Virtual Worlds for Role-Play Simulation in Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, an Evaluation Study. If you go to that page, you will actually simply find the abstract. But if you look on the right-hand side of the page, you will actually find the links that will take you to the full text or allow you to download a PDF for the whole white paper. So interesting academic stuff there, I guess. Pings from the Afterlife. Pings from the Afterlife. That's a lovely name for a blog. We have been here before. This is actually a really short link for a change. That's nice. So copy and pasting it. I don't really know how to pronounce this one. The title of the blog is sort of like ACK, AAAACK, but then Angel. ACK Angel. And apparently this is an avatar, and he's known as Open Sims Angel of Mesh, Blender Guru, creator, and all-round good guy. And that blog features a little chat with Angel. I think that's the way I'm supposed to pronounce it. So I thought that was quite an interesting little blog too. And right, well, all my other blogs, I come back to Hypergrid Business, the Hypergate script with a built-in threat level, which Maria will tell us about. Avacon, who are now leading a new group for interoperability, which Maria will tell us about. And yes, and Metropolis again. So I'll go back to you, Maria, until I can find something you don't already have.
All right. So we talked about ZetaMex coming back from their little breach on Monday. You mentioned my Hypergate script. And I actually posted a new version of that a couple times. So I redid the textures in it. You're free to grab them. They're CC0 textures. So you can use them in any way, shape, or form, including commercial. Sell them if you want. I don't care. I just want people to use the stuff. And what this Hypergate does is it finds out whether you are able to run the BlamGate script or not on your region. And this has to do with OpenSIM threat levels. So it figures out your threat levels, and the script automatically adjusts itself, and it runs the right commands for your region. Then what it does is it looks to see if the destination is up or not, and if it's down, the gate will go black. And then it's programmed in with a nice little whoosh effect, a nice little animation, and everything's built into this flat panel. It's just a flat square, and you could slide it into any kind of frame that you want for your Hypergate. And the other cute thing about it is that it's phantom. You walk through it, but it still registers that you collided with it. And I am particularly proud of that little bit of functionality. And so check out that script. Again, feel free to use any pieces of it that you like. The way it works is it takes the destination from the subject line and the name of the gate from the name of the object. So the description is the destination, and the name of the object is the name of the gate. OS Grid put out an announcement on Monday that they were able to save the drives, but it cost them something like $3,000 more than what they expected, and it almost wiped out their bank balance. So they do need more money, and the donation thing is on their website, my website, and everybody else out there. Kitely has donated $250. Littlefield donated money. So if you are a grid owner and you want to help out a fellow grid that does all the testing for everybody else, definitely OS Grid is so huge that if something is tested on OS Grid, you know it's been tested because they really test. They've got a huge scale for testing things. So definitely worthwhile to support them if you are a grid owner or a hosting company or just an OpenSIM user. Okay, then we on October 1st, I put out a report about all the events that are happening in October coming up. And Island Oasis is right at the top there with a Halloween party on October 31st. Littlefield Grid has a month-long Halloween on their Stonehaven party aisle. So, and they're Hypergrid enabled, so you can stop by and teleport in. And they're going to have a costume shop with Halloween costumes. Mal, you already mentioned Metrobofest is ending today on Metropolis. There's a little piece in there about Spellscape enabling Hypergrid. the Magic themed British grid, and I had some quotes in there. They've been planning on opening Hypergrid for a while, but they were holding it up because they were worried about security. They were waiting for the export permissions to be finalized. Now, export permission is a fourth kind of permission that Avanation and Singularity folks created about a year and a half ago. Well, that hasn't gone anywhere. Nobody's using it. Kitely invented their own system. Inworld is experimenting it with filtering OR exports, but Inworld isn't about to become Hypergrid enabled and use it for that. So it really hasn't gone anywhere. So Spellscape gave up on waiting, and they're just using the standard export permissions that are already there in OpenSim. And so their rule is, if it's full perm, it can travel. If it's not full perm, it has to stay on the grid. So very clear cut.
Right. While you've actually raised the subject here, if I can just intervene. During the week, I had a Kitely avatar and I couldn't get to a Safari because I couldn't detach my eyes.
Again,
and
it wouldn't let every week.
Yeah, it wouldn't let me get out of Kitely because my eyes, there weren't any other eyes available for me to wear. The OpenSim library wasn't showing up, and I couldn't get my eyes off because you can't detach eyes. So they refused to let me off the grid to Hypergrid. But that aside, I got myself an avatar on the Avacon grid. This isn't the Avacon venue location, but the Avacon grid. And it's actually the first time I created an OpenSim avatar where I actually teleported out to another grid and found that I had the folder called My Suitcase. And noticed that everything I picked up or bought on other grids went to my suitcase instead of my normal inventory. And I was going to ask you, this, because you just mentioned it, is this part of the security system to make sure that stuff you buy on other grids other than your home grid go to a suitcase and are governed differently from your inventory?
It's a previous security layer. The idea is that if you're in a foreign grid, let's say, Mal, you open up your own grid, you have full access to the database of that grid, right? So if I show up and I have stuff in there in my inventory, you as the owner of this grid can rummage through my inventory and see if there's stuff in there you want to take. Now, you probably don't want to do that because there's like 5,000 of items in there. It's mostly called primitives.
And if I did that, I'd lose my best reporter, wouldn't I?
Oh no! Hey, if you can straighten out my inventory, if you can clean up my inventory, really, I seriously appreciate it. In fact, you can take all of it, and I'll probably be better off.
Yeah, I can't even sort out my own, so don't go there.
So there's been no actual instances of anybody doing this. And if you're a hacker and you want stuff, go to Second Life and copy bot it the way all the other hackers do, because that's where the stuff is, right? But griefer could, in theory, cause damage. So what they set it up for was that a foreign grid can only access your suitcase folder. So when they give you stuff, it goes into the suitcase, and when you want to take stuff out of your inventory, they can't just pull stuff out of your inventory against your will. So that's the reason for the suitcase folder. It's actually pretty old technology. The new stuff with the full perms means that if you teleport into Spellscape from another grid and you try to buy something and it's not full perm, it won't let you buy it. It will say, well, you can't take it with you, so you can't buy it. So you can only buy full perm items or full perm freebies. And if you travel out of Spellscape grid, you have to make sure you're wearing a full perm outfit so it can travel out. And when you save an OR file, again, same thing, you can only save stuff that's your own or that's full perm. So this is a way to allow travel while protecting creator content. If a creator wants the stuff to stay on the grid, all they have to do is, for one of those 3 perms, set it to no, or set them all to no if they want to. But as long as it's not full perm, it will stay on the grid. And given that the export permission hasn't been worked on, I'd say this is a pretty decent compromise. And they've also donated the code for the IAR filters. So in addition to filtering ore exports, you can also filter your inventory exports. So very nice balance between security, protecting residents, and protecting creators. And I really applaud them for doing that.
Wonderful.
All right, Sim Valley, a grid based in the Netherlands, has just doubled in size. They've added new servers, 500 more regions. They're giving away a bunch of plot of lands, and they're giving away educational institutions get first 3 months free, and they're saying that they're growing because of they're getting so many customers. Another grid that's growing is the Great Canadian Grid. Remember we talked about them.
Yeah.
They have the $4.50 region prices, the lowest priced regions anywhere. They're hypergrid enabled, and they've grown quite a bit. They've more than doubled their active monthly users, and they've more than doubled their in size as well. Of course, they started out small. They went from 16 to 26 regions, but still, for a brand new grid based in Canada, that's pretty good. But of course, the picture I have for them is all tropical islands, so that doesn't look very Canadian. The Welcome region does look Canadian. There's a big log cabin there, and it's heavily forested. All right.
I suppose when you get these national grids like Franco Grid and things like that, they are meant to be grids for the the language speakers or the population of that country. So they're not defined by being particularly French. For example, they could be South Seas or North Pole. But however, carry on.
Yeah. Virtual Highway has a 4-region VAR region set aside for Halloween. And they're going to have parties and contests. Their building contest started October 1st and will run through the whole month. And they're also going to have a costume contest at the end of the month. And all the proceeds from their Halloween Region Festival Park is going to go to the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. That's pretty nice of them. Okay. Let's see. There's a new grid called Little Bird that is having an avatar contest, and they're giving away a free region to anybody who wins it. Little Bird Grid is a brand new grid, and I just teleported over. They're on the hypergrid. A lot of young boy avatars on that grid, so it's a little creepy. Pillars of Mist is on its own again. They were a separate grid, then they joined Zeta Worlds. Now they're on their own again, and they're having a dance party to celebrate. Oh, dance party's over, but they've got something new going on. They've got stuff going on all the time. They've got, I think, a pumpkin contest that they just had, and they have other stuff. So they're on hypergrid, so you can come visit. I can't pronounce this. The Sunshine Library. They've got outposts in Second Life and in OpenSim. We had them on the show a few weeks ago, right?
Yes. Do
you remember how to pronounce their name?
I think it is Senshai. Yeah.
They have a month-long goblin challenge all month on Kitely with a little goblin that's hiding somewhere on the library's regions. Very cute little goblin. Got a picture of him up. Tangle Grid, we mentioned them earlier. They've got those expos going on. Well, they have the current expo, the Watercraft Expo, is ending today. So if you didn't come, it's too late. It's going to be too late now. But they're going to have another expo later this month, October 25th through November 2nd. It's the History of the World Expo. And then a Winterfest Expo at the end of November, and a Home and Garden Expo December 27th. So if you're a creator or a designer or somebody who wants to promote your goods and you fall into one of those categories, get in touch with the grid and get yourself in there. They've been getting hypergrid traffic to these expos. So it's turning into quite a nice thing for them and put them on the map. And they have launched a second grid, as you know, because running one grid wasn't enough for them. They launched a second grid, so they now have 2 grids they're running. And the second grid is a nonprofit called Tangle OS, where anybody can connect a region. So it's an open grid like OS Grid or Metropolis or Craft or Franco Grid, where people can connect regions for free. And they did that because of the OS Grid outage, to give people another choice of places to connect to. Okay, some people are moving. Of course, people are moving off of OS Grid to like every possible direction. A lot of people move to Metropolis. Metropolis, by the way, needs money to pay for the servers to handle all the existing load. Now, it's not just people who are coming to Metropolis, but entire regions coming to Metropolis, regions full of stuff. And even if people go back to OS Grid, copies of that stuff is going to stay on Metropolis, and they will continue to pay for storage for that stuff. So please give them some money. Yes, you were saying?
It's interesting. In my quest, actually, in fact, I'll go and give you a little rest for a minute or two anyway. In my quest to find alternative places, I ended up at Avacon Grid. I went to Hypergrid.org and tried, which is the site for Metropolis. And every time I've tried to register an avatar there, it says, please agree to terms of permission, which I did constantly. And I have never been able to register an avatar there. And of course, a lot of my friends on the Safari actually use Metropolis as their home base in the absence of OS Grid. So I was really getting a bit annoyed. I wanted an avatar that said Mal Burns as hypergrid.com. It sounded good because it said hypergrid. Anyway,
well,
I'll just give you.
You can email me afterwards. I'll put you in touch with the grid administrators. They'll fix you up.
Give me get them a bollocking. Okay. A few other interesting links just to fill in while you give you a little break if you need one. I have come across a site, and I profess to know very, very little about them. I'm going to give you the link now. It's a site called lucidscape.com. Does that ring any bells with you, Maria?
Yes, I've been planning to write about it,
right.
But I haven't yet.
Okay, right. They claim to be building the metaverse, an operating system of the metaverse, shall we say? Yes, so I put a link in chat there, and if you're interested, I hope we might be able to have a conversation about this in the near future. So fascinating, because they seem to be, shall we say, out on the limb. They don't seem to connect with anybody else I know of. Now, the Second Life Inquirer, which is SLE these days, is actually rather nifty too. It does actually cover occasionally some interesting stuff that isn't directly Second Life related. There's a particular link coming over. Is about the Avatar Social Network, because you can now access the Avatar Social Network as an independent app on your smartphone or tablet. So that link contains information about exactly how to do just that, and keep in touch with all your Avatar friends when you're not in world, so to speak. And a few days ago, the next link is to the BBC. Yes, good old BBC. This is a post saying, can virtual reality make you a better person? Serious stuff here. Nice illustration of somebody which looking like her. So one of those things they have in Star Wars, laser swords or whatever. But she's got one popping out of her eyeball. The strange graphic, but again, the kind of interesting article you might like to sort of check out. There seems to be quite a lot of articles like this these days. I mean, the hardware side of Oculus Rift and everything else has sort of taken off, and VR is very much on people's tongues now. So it's not surprising that we're seeing quite a lot of interesting academic or newsy articles about the implications of the technology rather than the fact of the technology itself. So that I think is one of them. And I think this is exciting. I mean, we don't normally go for games here, But this is a post that came up at Wired magazine during the week. And this is about a world, basically the first virtual world, I think, that could really be called a virtual world. And I could never remember its name. You know, I'm often sitting here saying, do you remember what's its name? But this dates back to the 1980s, I believe. And it was brought online by Lucasfilm, the very Star Wars people I was just talking about. And it was called Habitat. And it ran on some very antiquated equipment and using very antiquated protocols that have long since been lost to the mists of time. But apparently, it is going to be brought back online by Oakland's video game museum. And I believe that if you have the right emulators and right kit, you will be able to actually log in and partake in it. It's not a virtual world as we know it now. It's a sort of glorified chat room with avatars and big blocky pixels. Barely an avatar, really. But I think if you look back at history of virtual worlds, there's a lot of overlap with games, technology-wise. But in theory, I think you could probably say this really probably was one of the earliest attempts to build what we would now call a virtual world. So it was rather nice to read about that being revived for historical posterity. Now, I've also got, I don't know if you know about this one, Maria. This is a link to a blog called Austin Tate's Informatics blog. This is one I know I get feeds from and very occasionally find something on. And it's advertising AI land, as in artificial intelligence, I suppose.
I was just about to tell you about that grid.
Right, okay.
That was my next item on the list.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a minute. But meanwhile, I put the link in there. So that's good news. Another open simulator. An article at Polygon is talking about Jaunt VR, which, of course, we have covered before. But this perspective is Jaunt VR makes history repeatable, and every spectator becomes part of the show. Nice sort of headline there, really. The idea that, you can engage people in history, shall we say. SL Inquirer again. This one, I believe, is actually in Second Life. It's an interview with somebody called Max Chatnoir. It's she. Despite I always thought it was a he, but that's probably down to the Max. Basically, they are professor of biology at someplace in Texas, and they have created the world called Genome Island. It's all dedicated to genome study and things, highly interactive visual experiments, giant cell models, and anything you want to know about the genome system, basically. She was actually at Virtual World's Best Practices last year, but that link to SL Inquirer is basically an interview with her entitled The Genetic Journey of Max Chatnoir. So thought that was an interesting piece too. And there we go. That's my latest update. I do this as I go along now, so now we can go back to Maria and she can tell us about the AI grid. This sounds interesting. So over to you, Maria.
Oh, I just all I know about is there's 7 regions and it's hypergrid enabled. And the reason that he set it up is because those regions used to be on OS Grid. And he hasn't been able to access them for a month. And finally, he just gave up and said, okay, I'm starting up my own grid for this. And so that's what I was leading up to. People are moving from OS Grid everywhere they can find a spot. Metropolis or Zeta Worlds or Tangle OS, or, we're having just a new grid of their own. Load tests continue for the OpenSim conference every Tuesday. I strongly urge people to join if they have a chance, because it helps make OpenSim stable. And right now, last I heard from Justin, we had a conference meeting on Thursday evening. He was able to get 400 people in there. But most of them were bots. So
They always are.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but the stuff that they're doing right now, pushing OpenSim to the limits, is eventually going to benefit everybody, because the fixes, the stability improvements are all going to be part of OpenSim Core, or part of future releases. So this is a good thing to get in to help out in, if you can. Okay, moving on from that, you mentioned Avacon already. They're it's a metaverse working group, and they're involved with several other groups in the Immersive Technology Alliance. Hopefully, they're going to be working on hypergrid interoperability between different platforms. But at the very least, hopefully, they'll be able to have like content interoperability or something, so you can move stuff around or sell stuff to multiple platforms. That'd be nice.
It'd be very interesting, actually, because I think there is an interoperability group already with, I think Will Burns, who used to be on this show, as part of it, as is Bruce Joy of Vast Park. And
Yes.
I think some team players are there too, so it'd be nice if it's connected.
That didn't go very far. That tended to be kind of a top-down, very theoretical sort of thing. Let's do a theoretical framework for this stuff that wasn't actually in line with what people were actually doing. So there's a nice the theoretical thing that technologists want to do is very different from what people on the ground want to do.
Yeah.
So
sure. I'm going to interrupt you again because actually when I handed back to you, I was looking at the time. Damien actually I know has to leave us very, very shortly indeed. So I'd like to just skip back over to him. But apart from thank you, Damien, for being here. But given the conversation, you were free to interrupt, but you haven't. Is there anything intriguing you'd like to comment on that's been discussed, or indeed anything else that you'd like to do as a soapbox before you leave?
No, I was just kind of absorbing it all, and I'll take it with me and kind of revisit some of the information you guys have shared. It's all good stuff, though. It's all good stuff. And I really appreciate you guys inviting me to come here and be here today. I really appreciate it.
It's been our pleasure. You're welcome to come back. Well, I won't say every week, but you're welcome to come back anytime. if you've got something to contribute or news to bring us, just let me know and we'll get you back on. It's been wonderful having you here. We're always keen to
Awesome. Thank you so much.
New voices with us. So it's been fun indeed. So thanks very much. What we'll do now is we'll spin our cameras around away from you a bit, which will enable. In fact, we'll go back to Maria so she can continue, and it will enable you to make a graceful departure. But thanks very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And back to you, Maria.
All right. Yes. Reddit may launch a new cryptocurrency, and this one's going to be different because it will be backed. If it launches, it'll be backed by shares in the company. Normally, cryptocurrencies are just backed by the network of people using them, and nothing else. So if everybody leaves the network for something better, the value of the currency collapses. Or if everybody rushes into the network, the value of the currency skyrockets, and you have like extreme volatility, like we've seen with all the Bitcoins and their the various flavors of the Bitcoin currency. So this would be interesting, and it might go somewhere. So and then people in OpenSim are always interested in what's happening with virtual currencies, and in virtual worlds in general, because PayPal isn't stepping up. PayPal does have relatively high transaction fees, and especially for small payments. So I'm always keeping an eye on that. You already talked about the Facebook real name policy. I'd like to point out that Google has dropped its real name policy altogether this summer. Facebook is just replacing their real name policy with an authentic name policy. And so either way, if you're an avatar, it's risky. Now maybe they'll ignore you, or maybe they'll catch you up in one of their sweeps. So I'm using Facebook just for my family stuff because my mother-in-law is on Facebook and my grandma. But for the most part, I use Google Plus these days for my OpenSim and Second Life things. I am going to be doing
they do say the Facebook is for granddads and grandmas these days, don't they? All the kids are deserting to their own media.
Right.
Yeah.
Or I'm waiting for my Elo invitation to come in.
As am I. Yes, they did send me a note saying we haven't forgotten you, but they didn't give me a pass. So
I heard they have something like 1 million people on their waiting list. Yeah. So next survey that I'm doing is the hosting provider survey, and that's going to be later this month or maybe early next month. And then after that, before the end of the year, I'm going to do a hypergrid destination survey, and I am accepting nominations for the hypergrid destinations. So what categories do you want people to talk about, and also what destinations we want people to look at. And I'm looking for specific destinations. A lot of people have been nominating entire grids. No, I need a region on that grid. Something. Because if you have a grid with like 100 regions, but people are supposed to like just wander the entire grid looking for that one freebie shop that's so great. No, give me a better address.
Okay. I think there might be an argument when we look at things like Tangle Grid, where the grid itself is a destination because it's a venue. Or something. There might be exceptions where a grid is small enough but popular enough to count as a destination. But I know what you mean.
Nearest Nook is
another one.
that. Yeah. So it's Hyperica because we're just in one region, and Sanctuary, same thing. But if you're a big grid, then we need a little bit more detail.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm gonna post the link to the form right here in chat in case anybody wants to submit an address. Okay. I wrote an article about differences in white hat and black hat marketing, because that's something that a lot of, I'll go back to this a lot because I think OpenSim really needs good marketing, and I've offered some advice there. One of my freelance writers did a story about virtual education titled Virtual Education Brings Down Education Barriers, with a really interesting story about a woman in Saudi Arabia who learned English in Second Life. And she wasn't able to leave her house or go to traditional classes because of her family and her society. And she was really able to expand her horizons in virtual worlds. And the article also talks about a project on the Logicamp grid, and it quotes a few experts about the advantages that virtual worlds offer. So very nice article. I want to thank Kate for doing that job for me.
Yeah, I met somebody in Second Life actually. She was a bit awkward to get on with, but I think she was one of several wives of somebody somewhere and could never get out the house very much. And although I did actually see her on camera once, so she wasn't shrouded in a burqa or anything like that. I think she was in Pakistan. But it was really fascinating, because in World she was anything but the stereotype you might imagine she would have to be in her real society. So fascinating stuff.
Right. The Oculus Connect, the official videos of all the talks have been posted. Yeah. And I strongly recommend people watch them. The Future of VR panel, John Carmack talked about Gear VR. He said some interesting things about Samsung. He had a couple of complaints about them. Like, for example, the phones don't have positional tracking. So when you move your head forward and backwards, it doesn't pick up. Only when you turn your head does it pick up, which means that this, causes nausea. And he complained about that. And he complained about the refresh rate of the screen, that the graphics quality isn't as good as they wanted to. But one interesting he said Samsung ticks twice a year. So twice a year, every 6 months, they refresh their hardware.
Yeah.
And when you compare that to consoles and PCs that are refreshed once every few years, this means that a smartphone is actually an interesting platform to do VR on, because it does get better so much faster than other types of hardware. So I thought that was really interesting.
Samsung really seem to lead over more than Apple or anything else here, because they are a hardware company. Software's never really been their thing, so they just constantly bring out new improved models and onto the market.
And Oculus is working on the software side for them, so very interesting. And speaking of Oculus, Marriott Hotels strapped some new Oculus kits on some brides and grooms outside of New York City Hall and teleported them to exotic honeymoon destinations. Very nice use of virtual reality for marketing, and they're going to be going out on the road and doing this in other cities as well.
Did you say this is the Marriott Hotels?
Marriott hotel chain, yep.
Yeah, they unfortunately, that news has been dampened a bit by revelations today that apparently they've been blocking their users' Wi-Fi signals in order to make them pay for internet connectivity in their rooms. Yeah, which is a slightly less agreeable aspect to what they're doing.
They got their hands slapped. They got their hands slapped on that one.
Yeah,
they did indeed. But actually, I saw some photographs, and it looked, like two people standing in telephone booths one day, going on a virtual tour. It was, it's a bit like that trend we were thinking about, where when it comes to virtuality, it's probably going to be the out of home experience, the booths and the gaming arcades that people will pick up on this first. Yeah.
Yep. So there's a new headset manufacturer out there called Visus VR, and they're not a cell phone case or a peripheral for a PC. They're both. So what they do is they, instead of you having to pay for a screen and accelerometers and the motion detectors, you just slide your cell phone in there. But because cell phones are still underpowered, it plugs into a PC for the simulations. So the end result is that it costs just $99, combines the best of both worlds, and they're starting shipping in December, and they're taking pre-orders now. So that's something interesting to try out. We'll see how that works. I like that idea. And another one. This is combines an off-the-shelf Oculus Rift with an off-the-shelf Leap motion controller, and it's from Sightline VR. And what it does is it sticks the motion controller to the front of the Oculus. So right now with the Oculus DK2 kit, they have a camera that's sitting out in front of you on the table somewhere that registers your hands. So if you move off to the side, you're out of camera view. This one puts the camera right on your face, on top of the Oculus. So when you wave your hands in front of it, you get the Leap Motion picks up all the gestures, and you have very accurate gesture control. And they have a really, really fascinating video up, which I embedded on the site, of how people would be using it. And with a very nice interface that they also wrote, which is like a touch screen kind of interface, except the screen is virtual. My problem with it is that your hands are up in the air, and it must get pretty tiring. But I assume that the screen could be lying down on a desk just as well as being up in the air too.
I've actually found it interesting here is I've got a Leap Motion, and I was always fascinated by what that could do. And again, it's okay flipping a page or something, but keeping your arms in the air all the while is a bit of a strain. But if you're at a desk or something, I find that as long as you're resting your elbows and you're positioned right, then you can cope with that a lot more. But since you mentioned that, something that occurred to me too, and I can't vouch for the improvements yet because I haven't actually been able to try it, but I noticed that 2 days ago my Leap Motion drivers updated to the new version, which seems to be the one they've been sending out to developers for quite a while. So I'm looking forward to finding out just how more powerful the software update is.
All right. So speaking of waving your hands in the air, another company trying to solve that problem is called Nimble. And what they do, as far as I can tell, is it's a little thimble that goes on the tip of your finger. And you wave your finger in the air.
This is a Kickstarter, isn't it?
It's not it's an Indiegogo crowdfunder.
Oh, right. Okay. So,
but they've only raised less than $3,000, and they're asking for $50,000, and they've got 4 days to go. So I don't think people are really enthused about this. But if you're enthused about it and you have an extra 40,000, well, 47,000 lying around, quick, run and fund them.
It seems a bit of an oddity, doesn't it? I mean, to really work, I think you'd have to have a thimble on every finger, and then you might as well be wearing haptic gloves or something. So,
it's just the one finger. You can only point with it.
Yeah.
So you can't move your hands. You're just moving your one finger. So,
This sort of brings up an interesting tidbit that I noticed go by in the tech stream of news this week, and that is that apparently the response rate and the money draw from Indiegogo type projects or whatever has been declining. In other words, they're not raking in quite the dollars in general that they were a while ago. So it seems like some of the new and shiny object phenomenon of Indiegogo type funding has begun to wear off a little. I suspect it may be a reflection of things that have not produced on schedule or even remotely close. And I've got one of those that I invested in that I'm still waiting to get the gadget called a Maestro, which is supposed to be a fingered device to use instead of a mouse. And they've got them, but they've had severe production issues with getting the darn things out the door.
I wonder if it's a bit like, when we have these, massive adverts for charities and things and big events like back in the day, Live Aids and things like that. And then people suddenly start reporting charity fatigue. And, charities not raising much money anymore. And I kind of wonder whether the Indiegogo and the crowdfunding and all that sort of stuff, it has really taken off as an economic model. But maybe, it's gone through a burst phase and people are now becoming a bit more cautious, mostly because it is an investment that they might not get anything back on. But also there's just far too many now. And people, if you give people 20 choices, and they can't decide what to invest in, half the time they won't invest in anything.
Good point.
Because they can't make up their mind. But so maybe something like that's beginning to happen, and there'll be a slowdown.
Or maybe it's just typical network effect. Kickstarter's getting all the publicity, so people go to Kickstarter, and they get more projects. They wind up having more successes, which bring Anyway, so speaking of Kickstarter. Another Kickstarter that's coming to an end in 10 days is Air VR, which is another headset case. But this one finally works with an iPhone. And they are planning to sell it for $49, which is pretty cool. Ooh. But not for the iPhone 5. It works with the iPhone 6 Plus.
The new one. Oh, good grief. So they're leaping ahead.
And also it works with the iPad mini and the iPad mini with Retina. And the videos are really funny because you just have this guy with this giant iPad strapped to his face.
Yeah. But it seems to me the iPhone 6 Plus and the iPad mini aren't that far apart. I mean, I've got an iPod Touch and I've got an iPad, so I haven't got anything in the middle there except an Android thing. But
when you see
that use size seems a bit big for me, in this context.
When you see it strapped to somebody's face, it just looks giant.
Yeah, exactly. Really it looks like an Oculus Rift who's going to walk down the street with that on there.
Yeah, but they've already brought in $25,000 Canadian, and their goal was only $20,000. and it's a very simple case that your phone slides into or your iPad slides into. You wear it on your head. You got a couple of adjustable straps, and then they got the lenses. So it looks really interesting. I guess this you'd use this for watching 3D movies on an airplane. So it's pretty cheap, $49. If I had an iPad Mini or an iPhone 6 Plus, I would definitely be ordering this, but I don't, so I won't. But if you do, check this out. This looks like a really good deal, and you've got 10 more days to get it on a Kickstarter. So go ahead and do that. And finally, I have a question to ask you guys, and should have asked it earlier where Damean was still around. So according to the Hyperica traffic statistics from Google Analytics, the second most popular subjects that people look through are the adult destinations. I am shocked to find out that people are looking for dirty stuff on the hypergrid, but apparently that is the case. So here is my question for you guys. So I'm currently redoing the Hyperica grid, and we're totally reconfiguring the whole thing. And I've already put up some pictures of the new build. I love it. Cider Jack of Katie Jack Studio was the one who worked on it, and I'm hoping to have him in as a guest sometime to ask him about how he is so excellent and wonderful. So we're thinking about this. What are we going to do with adult destinations? Do we want them to be out there in the public next to all the other gates, right there under the sun, wide open for any kid to walk through? No. So I don't want that. But at the same time, this is something that apparently a lot of people want, and I can't keep legal adults from enjoying adult stuff, and especially because they want it. And
we look at you look at anything, especially any new platforms and things like that. The sex industry is in there first. I should get Stroker on to talk about this. I saw him online earlier.
No, it's going to drive the hypergrid. I mean, I want the hypergrid to grow, and that means embracing all this stuff. Not the illegal stuff, but the legal stuff that everybody wants is the adult stuff. So what I'm thinking, I mean, I'm going to just throw this out here. What about a door that you have to be? The door says you have to be 18 to enter. By opening this door, you confirm that you're an adult, and you open this door, and you descend into an underground dungeon that has the gates to all the adult grids.
Well, in Hyperia, I mean, that would make perfect sense. I mean, not necessarily the gaming side of it there, but just, one building contains adults-only links or adults-only gates.
Or maybe,
you wouldn't need to mix them.
Or maybe like a panel in the sky, like a little island, a cloud. If you were looking for adult content, would you prefer to find it in a deep dungeon or in a cloud?
That's Tara. I
don't know. Neither one. I'd be more just inclined to create a separate building to contain the adult content stuff.
A separate building.
And not because anytime you take something, your dungeon idea, and you got to be 18 years old, to click on this door and enter. Well, we all know that that's bullshit online. Pardon my French. But what that is, that's a red flag waved under the nose of any 15-year-old kid.
The goal is to keep grandmothers away, because the grandmother will say, "Oh, this is the adult section. I will be shocked if I go in there." And so, if anyone's watching, they won't go in there.
Well, I think you certainly label it. I would label it adult content. I would label it adult content. But beyond that, I think that you want it visible enough so people who are jumping in and are interested in that sort of thing are going to spot it easily.
Right.
But you do want it, teased out so people who don't want it and don't want that sort of thing, don't can say, oh well, I'm going to ignore that chunk.
So basically, if a school field trip is walking through this region, I don't want anything to be offending their little eyes.
Yeah, that's what I say. If it's in a separate building, and no, I wouldn't. You know, I wouldn't make too big a deal out of trying to say you got to be 18 to come in here, just because that turns it into an attraction.
As
that
if
makes
it
it.
wasn't an
That's like
attraction.
saying no, you can't. And any 15-year-old will say, you want to bet.
My suggestion would be, I mean, like in Second Life, you know, unless you're registered at a certain age, you can't go to Syndra. I mean, I presume there must be some system in place where you can parcel off parts of Hyperica with a building, you know, for adult links. And the moment they cross the...
I'm not going to do that.
That's extra steps for the sort of thing that...
Yeah. Basically, I'm going to follow the policy that most websites have. If they have adult content, their splash page, their welcome screen says, you have to be 18 to enter.
Advanced virus
Just click on this to affirm that you're 18. If you're a liar, that's your problem. As far as we're concerned, you know, you agree that you're 18 so that you're not accidentally dropping you into the middle of a whole bunch of adult stuff. So,
but that basically means you won't be able to have a school party coming looking at links, because to get into the grid they'll have to set their adult.
If you get into the grid, if anybody gets into the grid, you know, you're still talking about a virtual environment. So in that, when you get in there, you have an area. You know, maybe there's a little path, but there's a doorway for this stuff. And then the other stuff is off in a different area.
There's a doorway to block off the line of view, so you're not accidentally seeing boobies.
Okay.
By going through the door, you confirm that you are an adult.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying, and you said no, you're not doing that. So I just sort of thought you like Tara suggested, you'd have the adult bit links in a separate building, and there'd be some kind of script or something that the moment you headed in, or you know, across that boundary, you got an alert to confirm you're at my age.
No, I'm not going to have a script or any kind of alert. Just a sign that says that if you cross this line, if you cross this point, if you go through this door, you confirm that you're over 18.
Okay, I'm with you.
So I'm not going to have any extra verification steps. Like, I'm not going to make you prove that you're over 18, but just like by walking through, you agree that you will be seeing adult stuff, and don't be shocked.
Yeah,
I have another thought here. If you have the impression that you have school groups using Hyperica as a jumping off point, that you either might want to set up some specific hours when you lock down that adult content section, or a means whereby they notify you with X amount of lead time, and then for while they're in there, you lock down that segment. So I would parcel that so that you can close it.
That sounds like too much work.
Well, it's work. It's just, you know, it's just a question of if, you know, if doing something to help those that audience.
I mean, the thing is, I will make it easy for teachers to take a class through by, you know, if a teacher's keeping an eye on the students, they're going through, they're not veering off into the adult area, just like if she was taking them down the street, you know, that they don't veer off into the adult nightclub, right?
I actually see, I thought you were sort of semi-joking when you asked the question originally, but I can actually see the idea of, for example, the underground room, where the links are underground, because anybody wandering around on the surface, you know, looking at the regular portals will not necessarily immediately realize there's something underground. So you could have a discrete cave entrance somewhere or something saying adult links down here. You know, that might be the way. So, you know, kids wandering around on the surface, if there were any there, wouldn't easily, you know, see where to go. But there, you know, anybody who knows how to use the camera.
Kids wandering around can't find it. Then the grown-ups who who would be most interested can't find it either.
Yeah, it swings and roundabouts. It swings and roundabouts, really. I'm not really very keen on censorship, but and especially when you consider that they're on the tour, then they're presumably going to be even if they can find a gate to an adult grid, they're on the tour with their class and their teacher, so they're not going to go through that because they'll lose contact with the classroom. So
and the teacher can come over to their desk and thwack them to. Wait, all right, where are you?
I was actually thinking more of things like the Hypergrid Safari groups, where you have a mix of educators and other people who are adults who are traveling the hypergrid, but they still don't want to see boobies because they're a mixed group. They might come back on their own and go in the adult dungeon or adult building or adult cloud or whatever. But while they're part of a mixed group, maybe they don't want to be doing that, and they want to stay in the safe areas.
But my experience,
unless it's a hypergrid sex tour, which case
I don't know. I'm thinking of the folks, the ever increasing number of folks on the Hypergrid Safari. Nobody seems to be too distressed at anything. Actually, they end up in very bizarre places. I don't know. I'm against censorship. Really, I mean, within the terms of the law, you've really got to keep, in most countries, you've got to keep kids away from that. But, I'm not too worried about the nannies. I think they usually like to be shocked. They take a seat, they'll say, "Oh my goodness gracious me, what's happening here?" What you don't, the words they don't come out with is "yummy, yummy."
I think from your general visitors, having them in a separate area, however you want to gate that is
okay. So
is one thing, but I definitely would not mix them in, because it's like, if you type in something, if you Google something, and and the first 4 items turn out to be links to X-rated sites, and what you typed in was not an X-rated search, that's real annoying. Yeah. And so if I'm out searching for destinations and I have to figure out which ones are X-rated, I'm going to lose interest in it real fast as a regular user. So keeping them separate makes sense. And the other kind of piece of this that I'm not at all in the censorship mode, but there are certainly websites, and I'm happy to conjecture there are probably grids or destinations that are gateways into activities in the adult entertainment arena that are clearly illegal. And I don't know what kind of screening you've got in place for checking out, for vetting destinations, or for any of that.
I think really all we can do is hopefully go to as many destinations as possible to check them out before you list them or put data to them, as it were.
Well, either I go to all of them or my researchers go to all of them to basically to confirm that the links work at the very least. But so far, grids tend not to put illegal activities front and center in their welcome regions. So they tend to keep that in like private areas, more or less, so that, because if I can teleport in, anyone can teleport in and complain and report them to the authorities. So I have a feeling that that's more of a self-policing issue, because there are people out on the hypergrid that are extremely sensitive to certain kinds of illegal activities and will report the heck out of these grids. And they email me, and this came up with a couple of closed grids where people were emailing me and saying, get this taken down and everything else.
I think I think this is a judgment call thing in a way, because you have to remember that the hypergrid especially is, just like Second Life, is thoroughly international. And the laws that govern behavior in France and Sweden, where children exposed to sex, for example, I'm not talking about pedophilia, I'm just talking about cultural exposure, are very different from the prudish laws in America. And
or say in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and the ferocious sort of laws in Middle Eastern countries. So to be honest, when I put links and things up, to me, it's more of a judgment call, and it's not usually, the thing that would concern me most is not whether a destination is adult labeled or not, but more a point of what it is.
Right.
I would not want to put gates to destinations that I think have an attitude problem. Something I never cover. Something I never cover in Inworld links, for example, is that every Sunday as this program goes out, there are religious for the religions that believe that Sunday is a sacred day or something. There are church and synagogue services and mosque events happening in Second Life and elsewhere, and I always avoid those like the plague, because I view religion as propaganda, and there's a whole lot of I don't want to get into the argument, but I personally make a judgment call. I don't want to promote that stuff, even though you could say it's promoting the metaverse. I think it's there's something that says to me, I don't want to promote those particular activities. And the same would be the same for certain kind of sadomasochistic sex or something like that. So I'm not bothered about the sex clubs. But if I think the destination is exploiting women unduly, as opposed to just focusing on, well, should we say the basics of sex or something, if I think there's exploitation involved, then I don't really want to promote that either. So I'm making judgment calls based more on values rather than censorship.
Yeah, I don't
per se.
I wouldn't do that because I don't want to impose my own values on a hypergrid. And when I write articles, yes, I do choose certain topics to write about. But for a directory, I kind of see myself being more like Google, that there's other authorities out there to judge whether something is illegal or not. And there's plenty of processes in place for determining the legality of online content, that I don't have to get involved in that at all. I don't want to tell people what they should be doing on the hypergrid or what they shouldn't be doing on the hypergrid. And if they want to subjugate themselves, hey, whatever rocks your boat,
Well, I'm not talking so much about the role play aspect of it as the actual reality of it. If somebody wants to role play, submissive woman or something like that, then that is role play. But I'm talking about maybe virtual versions of, otherwise, operations that are blatantly exploitative. It's hard to put a finger on there. As I say, it's an individual judgment call.
I guess it goes back to the Nazis. Would I link to a pro-Nazi thing or not? And and I'm not going to go on record saying anything one way or the other, because either way, I will get a lot of grief from people, and I really hope that the question never comes up, and that the Nazis will always stay on private grids, so that I never have to worry about the issue.
It's why I say selective. I won't put a link or a gate to something which I fundamentally disagree with. I don't make a point of announcing that, but it's selective. There's nothing to say I can't produce a thorough directory, even if I leave certain subjects or destinations out, because I don't want to draw attention to them. But it's just tough. You're right. If you want to be the Google that can search everywhere and get everything, unlimited, then you really just have to blank your mind out and consider it all as data, and who cares what's at the other end. But if I do care what's at the other end, I'm afraid my moral conscience or whatever it is kicks in, regarding certain things. So.
All right. Okay.
Interesting. So but I actually think it's fascinating that you have targeted that. You can.
So what's your preference, Mel? Do you want a dungeon, a building, or a cloud, a skybox?
I say no to the skybox, because well, I don't know why. I don't know. They're just finding something teleporting up the sky. I actually rather fancy the idea of something that you have to enter by walking down into a basement, and that it will be, it will be easily findable, but not, it wouldn't be the first thing you see. So
Right,
somebody
right.
arriving sees it immediately. So you wander around the sections, like landscape destinations here and role play destinations there and professional destinations here, and then you eventually get to a little sign that says mature destinations downstairs or something. You wouldn't miss it, but it wouldn't be stuck in your face. I think that's
Right.
what I go for, and I think the underground metaphor is probably the nicest sort of sounding. It reminds me of going into seedy bookshops in Soho in the old days, where you gave a nod and a wink to the guy behind the counter, and he said, pointed to the staircase, and of course what was downstairs was different from what was upstairs. It's got that. I think it would be self-explanatory a bit, really. I was trying to think of an analogy with big newsagent chains of my youth that wouldn't ever have anything really controversial in their stores, but there was always you always gave a magazine to a newsagent if they was taking it, and you mark it top shelf. Because the tradition was you put stuff on the top shelf, not only because kids weren't tall enough to reach it, and the taller the adult, the more they could get at it. But there's nothing we can do in a virtual world that I can think of that is any parallel to that. So, I think the basement idea is the best, really. But that's just my thought.
And I guess the reason I was thinking of a basement is because the World's End role play, they're a vendor on Kitely Market, and they are giving away some of their things. They're giving away a full perm waterfall right now and a full perm log table. And they have the World's End. They have a demo region up on Kitely, and I visited their demo region, which is hyper good accessible. And they had a fantastic cave complex, where it's like this underground cave thing, and it was you can wander around these cave tunnels with the stalactites coming down, or stalagmites, whichever comes down, and it was so gorgeous. And there were multiple levels, and you could wander. You could really explore this cave system, and I was like, oh, I want this cave. I want this cave. What possible use do I have for a cave? But I really wanted it.
I love those too. A friend of ours on Second Life, who's actually does breedables and things, he spent ages setting up a sim for his breedables like this, and it's surprisingly it's not done very often because it's very hard to drop prims and make rocks and do anything convincing. But what he actually did was he did it first like a little warren of tunnels, a bit like a maze. And then he terraformed on a platform on top of the maze. So you could go underneath at any point, and there would be these maze of sort of tunnels that he sort of decorated separately. But from the surface, you just didn't know they were there. So you would go exploring, and eventually you'd find an entrance. And of course, it went down onto what was actually the real ground level of the sim. And you'd then be in these built tunnels that sort of interconnected and stuff. And I love that idea. Getting lost in a maze is one thing, but getting lost in a nice cave and finding crystals in every corner, yeah. Bring it on.
I would, whatever you end up with, I would stick with the same metaphor for all of your destinations. In other words, I wouldn't take something like caves and use it only for the adult stuff. That's just a case of saying stay balanced.
Gotcha.
Don't give them yet less or more credit.
Okay. All right, well, in that case, that will save me $20 because that's how much the cave kit costs with the expansion packs.
Yeah, if you do caves, do caves for everything. So set up a cave that's the adult stuff. Set up a cave that's the everybody. The whatevers.
Yeah. And I've already, we have a Mediterranean style build, so we'll just go with that. All right, too bad.
Okay.
I love that cave.
I think we're out of time.
I think
Well,
we
yeah,
are
I
due.
was just about to say the same thing. We may have started half an hour late, but we still managed to go over the 2 hours. It always happens, doesn't it? And at least Tara hasn't dropped dead on the camera yet. So.
No, but I'm close.
But you're close. I thought you might be. So I think it's about time we wrapped. Aside from what we've been talking about, any last thoughts, Maria? Anything you haven't got in yet, so to speak?
Well, all I want to do is I want to ask people to go and make a recommendation for your favorite hypergrid destinations. Really, I need you to give me some places so that we can do a big survey. What's your favorite shopping place? What's your favorite dance place? What's your favorite place to take newbies? What's, all that stuff. And I really encourage people to go and I just posted the link to the form again. So please stop by and recommend things. If you have news announcements or you can't figure out how to use the form or anything else, email me at maria@hypergridbusiness.com. And we're going to have the mid-month stats report coming out in a week and a half. So send me, if you have new grids that are just coming out, send them to me as well. I don't know about them. If I don't hear about them, I don't have any magic 8-ball that tells me when new grids appear. Unfortunately.
Okay. Very good. Well, of course, if you want all the latest news, do check hypergridbusiness.com. And if you want the destinations business we were talking about, look up hyperica.com on the internet, which is the site with destinations. And of course, there's a Hyperica grid as well. I need to actually ask you something I found this morning, Maria. On Twitter, you are now Meta Maria, aren't you?
Yes.
But there's also a separate Twitter account for Hypergrid Business, and I noticed they're pretty much the same, but people can actually get to both of them, can't they?
Well, the Hypergrid Business one is an automatic one. It just posts new stories as they come out. And my own one is the Maria Korolov account, which I've just it's Maria Korolov. It just has the Meta Maria label on it. That one is just whatever I feel like posting.
Okay, so that's the best one because we have Hypergrid Business too. Okay. And of course, if you want my Twitter feed, which sometimes points to Hypergrid Business anyway, and sometimes I get there first, who knows, twitter.com/Malburns, or one word. And if I do have a second account, twitter.com/Malburns_writer, which is Second Life destinations and events specifically. So, Tara, final thoughts before you collapse on the camera there.
Just one little news item that I managed to skip over in my freneticness in the early days. Daniel Voyager has been doing kind of quarterly summaries of the current sim counts in Second Life, and he just did a new one here this last week, and there continues to be a decline, but. An item jumped out at me on this, and so this is my question of the week. You can ponder and come up with answers for next week. Why has, over the last year, main grid regions is the mainland, right? Okay? Mm-hmm. Main grid regions have declined from 26,700 to 25,800. Where are they taking mainland grid sims away from? How are they doing that?
Well,
if you have an answer, save it for next week.
Isn't this just a thing where people abandon them and Linden take them back?
But the mainland grid, the sims mail are all busted up in little pieces, and so the chances of a whole mainland sim becoming empty is fairly, and if it does, what do they do with what's there? Because they're all connected.
Yeah, right. So it can't go away.
So it's a curiosity, and I'd love to find out what the answer to it is, and that's for next week.
Okay, just chop a few bits off the coastline, right? It's called the global tides are rising. You see, so the virtual tide is rising,
Right,
gradually
yes.
eroding the coast.
Yes, it's not a lack of customers, it's global warming. Yes.
Okay, well, for next week we can maybe find out what the solution to that little mystery is.
Okay,
All right.
absolutely,
All
absolutely
right.
wonderful. Right, before I go, I have two final links to post. The first one coming over is these are two sort of mainstream magazine articles that just came up in the week. The first one is about an exhibition which is happening. I think it's in Florida.
Is that
A guy, Gary Zabel, is advancing the art of virtual worlds. And yeah, basically it's about art from virtual worlds and things. And it's quite a long column. I mean, it deals with Brino, of course, and this Andrew Bailey. So it's a good article.
I think that that is
all,
probably the exhibit, Mel, that prompted the Brino retrospective.
Yeah. And of course, the Brino one is on OpenSim as well as in Second Life. Okay, so that was one link. Well, it's a good article, a long article. That's well worth reading if you're interested in virtual art. And the final one I've got doesn't really seem to have a title. It's a link to the California Sunday magazine, and this was published yesterday in advance of today's publication by Hamlet Orr. Or rather, he published a link to it. And again, it's just a sort of piece on virtuality without a title, believe it or not, at California Sunday. Oops. Well, okay. Go to New World Those and find that one, because for some strange reason my browser's lost a link to it, but that was another one. Okay, so I'm not at this stage going to find it again for you. Right, okay. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. It has been a great show as ever. Good to have our Oasis. Avatar Oasis guest here, and we will be back next week with news on the 48 hour. Yes, I counted right now. Machinima contest and who knows what else. If you'd like to watch this program in replay, you may already be doing so, of course. The best place to see us is at slartist.com. That's SLARTIST, which works on your iPad, your Android, your Mac, your Linux, your Windows, your whatever, basically. And it's also in glorious high definition, which it isn't actually in our channel here. It's only in standard definition. So do check that out, along with all our backstories, which backstories indeed. Back editions, I think is probably the right word too. So with that, I'll say goodbye. Thank you as always to Maria. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Mal, for having me.
And thank you, Tara. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you. Good week. Once we got going.
Yeah, of course. And thanks as always to myself too. This is going to be my new byline. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, or good tomorrow, depending on wherever or whenever you are. And we will be back same time, same place next week.